Ultimately, my criteria for whether or not someone stays in my life is, do they treat me well? Do I feel good around them? And are they actively adding something to my life? Either people are like, wow, good for you. That's like extremely harsh, but in a healthy way. Or people are like, wow, that's heartless. For so long, I think I had this idea in my mind of everyone's cooler than me. Everyone has their shit figured out more than me. Everyone's more confident than me. When I walk in a room, all anyone thinks is that I'm not as good as them. Basically, I want to make a habit of being uncomfortable again. I do feel like there is some misinformation and just a lot of fear surrounding periods for no reason. Hi guys. Today I'm all cozied up because we are doing episode 2 of my Girl Talk series. If you're new here, if you are not familiar with the series, basically, I just kind of talk about some sleepover-esque topics. So that can be friendships, dating, TMI, girly things, body image, mental health. It's really just like a very chatty, chill video. So if you guys are down for that, I hope you enjoy this episode. I have a matcha, obviously. I just want to get into it, starting with, I guess, the main event of this video, which is the fact that I have no long-term friends. So this is actually, I don't know, I think it's an area of my life where I'm kind of in the minority, and whenever I tell people this, they're always surprised, and I almost feel like they feel bad for me when I really don't think that they should. So for some context, what I mean when I say I have no long-term friendships is that I have no close friends in my life who have been in my life for a long time. Honestly, I don't have any close friends from high school left. I don't have any friends from middle school for sure, and from college, I really only have 1 or 2. There was definitely a time when I would think about my, I guess, social life and kind of feel like I was bad at friendships, bad at relationships. Because of this, because I had a lot of falling outs with friends in the past, and my perspective on it has definitely changed. When I look at other people in my life who do have long-term friendships, a lot of times they're relationships that don't really make sense to me. They're people that they don't really have anything in common with, and maybe they met in school and they just happen to be neighbors or in the same class, whatever, and just from that proximity, they started a friendship and they've held on to it for 20, 30, 40 years because why wouldn't they? And I think it's weird that we sort of make and keep friendships in this way. I'm using we generally, like as a society, I feel like this is the norm. And I've never quite subscribed to it because my logic is and always has been that I'm never going to keep a friend in my life purely because of the amount of time that they've been there. I understand that we grow attached to people, we have history with people. A lot of times it's harder for us to let go of that friendship, but I've been sort of ruthless in my life about not being afraid to change friendships when a certain person in my life is no longer adding or serving me in any way. And I don't mean serving me like doing stuff for me, I just mean like if that friendship is not actively adding and making an overall positive impact on my life, I don't feel a need or a pressure to keep that friendship, regardless of how long I've known the person, regardless of, you know, any circumstances that might tie our lives together. I'm always of the philosophy of just like cut that loose and move on. And I understand that it's a lot easier said than done, and there have been times where I've held on to friendships way longer than I should have. Looking back, I've been like, wow, I should have nipped that in the bud like early on, and I think I've become a lot better at that, recognizing red flags and signs that a relationship is not going to be healthy earlier. Like I said, I'm a big believer that length of time someone's been in my life does not indicate whether or not they should stay there, and I also feel that way about like blood. And what I mean by blood is like family, like being related to someone doesn't mean that I want to be around them. And I'm not even saying that as someone who has like really toxic family members, but I'm saying that I'm a big believer that if someone in your family is toxic, you shouldn't feel obligated to keep that person in your life just because you have this family tie. All of this is basically to say that I think people need to have higher standards for who's in their friends circle, and you can be acquaintances with whoever you want, but I think when it comes to like close friends or people you're regularly interacting with, like we could all be a little more selective, and that's sort of what I try to accomplish in my life. Obviously, I'm not perfect at it either, but ultimately my criteria for whether or not someone stays in my life is, do they treat me well? Do I feel good around them? And are they actively adding something to my life? And that matters so much more to me than, hey, I've known this person since middle school, we have these memories. Like, there are so many people that I can think of where I have these like foundational, formative memories that are just so sweet and positive with them, and they they are not even slightly in my life anymore. And that might be sad to some people, but I think I can still appreciate those memories while also recognizing that there's no need or benefit from us still being in a relationship, a platonic relationship. And I think that's kind of radical for some reason. I think a lot of people would maintain or stay in a friendship that's just kind of dead and has no reason to exist anymore because they want to preserve those memories or because of that history. And I just don't see a point to that. You're wasting your precious time and energy kind of beating a dead horse when maybe you don't have anything in common with that person anymore and you guys have grown into different people. And I think too often people try to force friendships with people who have become so different from them. You know, we change so much from our younger years into adulthood, and you know, I'm still changing so much, like every day, every week, every month. I actually heard Lauren Ramaki and Jeremy Lewis, they have a podcast, Wild Till 9. Lovely podcast. It used to be one of my go-tos. Now I just don't really listen to podcasts anymore, but they were talking about how one of their favorite parts of being adults is that they don't have to do anything they don't want to do, especially socially. I could not agree more. I think a lot of us can relate to and remember like times as children where our parents kind of dragged us to social situations, either that we didn't want to go to or with people that we didn't really like, but they were friends of the family and we had to maintain the relationship and all this stuff, right? I know I can think of many things, you know, neighborhood parties, family parties, even just hanging out with family friends that I didn't want to really do. Maybe I wasn't the hugest fan of those people, but I was pushed into it, which I personally think that children should have a little bit more free will when it comes to their own socialization. Like, we should allow children to stay home when they don't want to go to an event or they don't like the people there. I think that should be more normalized. That's just me. Yeah, I can think back to these times where I just had this pit in my stomach because I had to socialize with people who didn't make me feel comfortable, didn't make me feel accepted, made me extremely anxious, and I just didn't really have a choice because that's what it was, and our family was doing that, and I never ever wanted to upset or disappoint my parents, which is a whole other topic. I love my parents very much, and I never ever wanted to cause them unnecessary stress. So I would just go along with things, and I was always the people-pleasing, easygoing girl. As I started getting older and I started having this realization of like, hey, I don't want to spend time with people I don't want to spend time with, I started setting a little bit more boundaries, and that came with some conflict, some pushback from my parents, but I think they respected that, hey, she's getting older, we're gonna give her this freedom. And now as an adult, it's this whole new level where like any obligation I feel is self-inflicted and I can take that pressure off myself and just be like, hey, if I don't want to go to something, I'm not gonna fucking go. We'll get into it later how that has kind of gone too far in certain aspects of my life, but it is really freeing and really lovely and empowering that now like these decisions are genuinely my own. I'm not going to go into social situations that I don't want to go into, and I have that freedom and the choice to do that. What a lovely fucking thing. So what's kind of interesting is that I get a very mixed reaction when I tell people that this is my approach to friendships in my life. Either people are like, wow, good for you, that's like extremely harsh but in a healthy way, or people are like, and I've had close people in my life say this, be like, wow, that's heartless. Genuinely, I've had people say that, or like, you can't do that, like friends or family, like you have to stick by their side no matter what. I just don't subscribe to that idea at all. It is one thing to want to help the people in your life and want to help them through bad periods, but you never ever have to stay in a relationship that isn't good for you, whether that's romantic or platonic. Yeah, I think we as a culture are very good about saying, hey, have high standards in your relationships, but we forget to encourage high standards in your friendships. Basically, what I like to think of it as is I just participate in conscious socialization. That is a super fancy term that I came up with to describe what I'm talking about, of just like, instead of mindlessly staying in friendships and relationships and just hanging out with people to have people around, I'm really trying to focus on, in every step of a friendship, whether that's the acquaintance stage, the getting to know someone stage, or the closer bonded stage, staying aware of, okay, is this friendship serving me? How am I feeling about this person? Do I want to keep putting effort into this relationship? Just kind of feel things out as I'm getting into it and not get into close friendships with people who will ultimately be bad for me. Obviously, there's no way to predict the future. Anyone could play me, anyone could wrong me, I could be duped at any moment, but I do think that it helps set me up for as much success socially as possible. I will say it is not without its drawbacks. You know, there are times where I wish I had more close friends. I mean, I moved to LA a year ago. I would not say I have a very close friend here yet. I think I'm getting there slowly but surely, but it's been a slow crawl. That is tough at times, even though it does cause some pain. I know that I don't want to be settling, and I know that the right people will come into my life and I will find them. And I am actively putting effort in to strengthen the friendships that I've started here, the ones that feel good and that I think have potential. And I'm not going to force any friendship to stay in my life just so I'm not lonely or uncomfortable. Absolutely fucking not. So now that we've talked about my no long-term friendships thing, I really want to dive into social anxiety, and I want to talk specifically about things that I have been doing to try and overcome that social anxiety. I think a lot of us can relate to self-isolating during the pandemic. Like, duh, what else were we gonna do? We literally had to isolate ourselves. But I think that I got really comfortable being alone and just working on my passions during that time. You know, I spent a lot of time just editing or working on music and doing a lot of things alone, which I think was wonderful, and I love doing things alone, and I am a diehard introvert. And like I just said, I'm not gonna socialize just for the sake of socializing. However, I do think that my social anxiety mixed with the fact that I had these things that I like to do alone and I like being alone kind of mixed into this cocktail that made my anxiety worse and made it a lot harder for me to put myself out there, to take risks. I think I justify it a lot and make excuses for why I'm not socializing, and I think I've really started to realize that I need more social interaction in my life. It is such a delicate balance, and I am always struggling to find it because I can go too far the other way so easily. Like, genuinely, if I make 2 or 3 plans in a weekend, I can get so overwhelmed. I think like one socializing appointment a week would be perfect for me because I don't want to only see my boyfriend. Like, I don't want to become that girl that I've always kind of disliked that only sees her fucking boyfriend. Like, that's not my goal. I care about making good friendships here, and not just making friendships, but like doing things that are out of my comfort zone, and so often that involves some sort of social aspect. When I think back to the most electrifying, passion-filled times of my life, it's times where I was being creative with other people and meeting other people and really putting myself out there. You know, times where I was doing a lot of photo shoots with others. If you don't know, I do photography. That's like one of my main passions and hobbies. Those times are times that I look back on where I feel like I was really living, and they were uncomfortable and they were exhausting and they pushed my limits a little bit, but they were times where I really felt full of purpose and excitement. And yes, there is a risk there. You know, I could burn myself out. I'm putting myself out there socially, so I could end up feeling rejected, and that definitely did happen during those times, but it was so worth it. And I think what I've started to do now is I've gotten really comfortable being alone in my apartment, editing videos. You know, it's something productive, and I can pour time into YouTube and just other stuff that I do alone in my apartment and feel good about it because I'm being productive. And that's true, right? Those are good things for me to be spending time on, but I think I've gone too far that direction, and I really need to start pushing against my social anxiety again instead of just kind of succumbing to it and justifying it. Because ultimately, like, when I say, oh, I just don't feel like seeing people, a lot of that is just the fear and the discomfort that comes for me with socializing, and me just using that kind of as an excuse to not get out there and like see people and do things. And it's kind of hard for me to tell the difference sometimes, because it's hard to tell like whether I'm just genuinely enjoying my own company and it's perfectly fine and healthy and I don't need to see anyone, versus when it's like, okay, it's time to get back out there and do something that'll make you passionate and filled up. Sometimes it can be difficult for me to tell the difference between the two, because like I said, the amount of socialization that I like is a very delicate balance. So all of that context being given, I have been making an effort recently, and one of my goals for August actually is to just socialize once a week. At least once a week, plan something social. I've also made it a goal to do more photo shoots since that's a huge way that I like to socialize. And it's kind of killing two birds with one stone. Like I'm networking, I'm meeting a new person, and I'm doing something creative that's fulfilling for me. So I've started integrating this desire for more social interaction into my goals, which I'm very happy about. Okay, my battery died, so if the shot looks slightly different, that is why. I've been thinking a lot about how, you know, when I look back on my life and I'm thinking about highlights, a lot of those are with other people. Putting myself out there, doing social things is going to bring me a lot of memories, life experiences, stories. If I spend my entire week working and just doing things in my apartment and someone says, hey, what have you been up to? What's been going on? I have nothing to fucking tell them. Oh, I've been working. Oh, I've just been relaxing. Like that's not how I really want to live. I do think it's possible for me to balance both. It's not going to be easy. I think I can kind of try to fit my productive tasks around my life versus fitting tiny bits of life around productivity. Ooh, that's good. So now that I've kind of talked about why it's important for me to try and work on my social anxiety and why I want to be more social, let's kind of talk about some of the strategies that I like to use when I notice that I'm isolating myself and I need to push myself to be a little more social. First thing that helps me kind of be less intimidated by social interaction is to take people off a pedestal. Yeah, this has become easier and easier as I've gotten older, and I'm sure that will continue to happen. But for so long, I think I had this idea in my mind of everyone's cooler than me. Everyone has their shit figured out more than me. Everyone's more confident than me. When I walk in a room, all anyone thinks is that I'm not as good as them. First of all, what? Those are just not good or productive thoughts, but I was also just thinking that everyone else had their shit so much more figured out than they actually did. And it sounds kind of, I don't know, morally questionable, but genuinely taking people off of that pedestal and kind of looking for their flaws, looking for ways to humanize them and be like, oh, they're not all that, has really helped me kind of even the playing field and feel like I can walk up to them or I can interact with them without having this inferiority complex for no reason, because everyone has their shit, everyone's human, and I just try to look for those little quirks, those little areas of someone's life maybe where they don't have it together. And it's not to like ruin them in my mind or see them as less than me. It's literally just to bring them down to my level mentally so I'm no longer intimidated by them, because nothing good comes out of me being scared of and intimidated by other people for no reason. Another thing that is super helpful for me with overcoming social anxiety is just repeated exposure and kind of exposure therapy, like forcing myself into social situations. And sometimes this does mean that when I really feel like just being alone and staying home, I push myself to go socialize anyway. It depends. Like if I had a huge day of socializing yesterday and I don't feel like, you know, grabbing lunch with someone today, like I'll let myself cancel that plan because I literally just exhausted myself socializing. But if I haven't seen anyone in a week and I've gotten just really comfortable in isolation and maybe I have a plan to get lunch, I'm gonna make myself go to that lunch even if I don't feel like it, because I know I'm gonna feel better afterwards. And I've started realizing that that tension, that reluctance beforehand is my anxiety and my introversion talking, and it's not a genuine need, it's more a self-sabotage type of thing. This also goes back to what I was saying about how in the most exciting, exhilarating times of my life, I was pushing myself out of my comfort zone, and how I got to that place was just consistent exposure therapy of pushing myself, taking a little rest, pushing myself, taking a little rest, starting to make a habit of going out of my comfort zone and a habit of, you know, doing things that were scary, doing things that tested me and made me grow. And then it got to the point where I might be going into a situation that would normally scare me shitless, but because I've gotten so used to doing things that scare me shitless, it doesn't faze me anymore, and it's a lot easier and less dramatic when I do go into that situation. You know, I don't build it up so much in my head. Great example of this that comes to mind is right before I had my first internship in New York City, actually a couple years ago. I went to a photography workshop with one of my favorite photographers. I was scared so much for that workshop, but it was incredible. It filled me up with so much energy and and so much confidence afterwards, even though it was really a test and it was pushing myself in the moment, that when I went in for my internship, which is normally something that I would have been super nervous, you know, meeting a boss, like potentially starting a new role, that normally would have scared me shitless. But because I had just had this experience of doing something scary and, you know, proving to myself that I was capable of that, this internship didn't scare me at all. I didn't have anxiety walking into the room. I just felt calm and kind of like my barriers were already down. I was too tired and just like, I honestly just didn't have the energy to work it up into a big thing because, you know, I was busy. I was doing things all the time. I was making a habit of pushing myself and I just didn't have the time or energy or need to work it up into this big thing in my head. And all of this is basically to say that during times of my life where I am consistently making a habit of pushing myself, it becomes easier and easier to push myself. Versus if I have not seen a person in 4 weeks and all of a sudden I'm trying to go balls to the wall and do something really scary or, you know, meet someone new for the first time, it's gonna be a lot scarier because I have all this time to think about it in my head and I've spent all this time alone and gotten so used to being so comfortable. Basically, I want to make a habit of being uncomfortable again, and it doesn't need to be constant. I don't need to be pushing myself every day of the fucking week because that sounds exhausting and bad. Genuinely, but once a week, like trying to do something social or something exciting once a week, that is doable and not intimidating. And I think that's a great first step for me for kind of getting back into the flow of, hey, trying new things, meeting new people, all of that. And one more thing I'll say about like how I've been trying to overcome my social anxiety, be more social. Something that has really been helpful that's very practical is I've started making more rituals with friends. I've really only done this with my one friend, Dustin, but we basically made a plan that every single Friday we're going to go somewhere together to do work. It's a very simple plan. It's nothing crazy, but what it does is it builds socializing into my schedule. So even if I have a really busy, exhausting week and I don't find the time or make the time to make plans with somebody, I know that at the very least, I'm seeing that one friend, I'm furthering that one friendship on autopilot. And I want to start doing this with more of my friends, kind of having a go-to activity that we do together or a go-to day that we see each other, whether that's once a week, once a month, whatever it is. I would love to establish that with more of my friends because it really does just put your socializing on autopilot in a way that makes it a lot easier if maybe it's not something that comes super naturally to you to go out of your way to make plans. And it definitely doesn't for me. Like literally, if I was left to my own devices and I wasn't thinking about it, I would just not see anyone for 2 months. And that's not good. The last thing that I want to talk about is actually a request from one of you. Michelle, who's one of my consistent viewers, thank you so much, I love you, wanted me to talk a little bit about periods and I guess just sort of my period experiences. This is actually a funny topic for me because I'm on birth control and I don't really get periods anymore, so I feel kind of out of touch from it. I have really lucked out in the sense that I never had those really bad cramp periods. Like I remember my sister, not to put my sister on blast, but my sister and friends of mine literally being bedridden, like super sick from their periods, and me just looking at that like, oh my God, I do not envy you. Like that looks bad. And I was so glad that I didn't have that. I did have a couple times where I had like debilitating periods. 2 of them that stick out. One, I was at my neighbor's house when I was younger and I got my period kind of unexpectedly and I was hit by cramps so intensely that I fell on the floor. Like I couldn't get up. It was a whole thing. They had to like slowly move me down the stairs. And the second time was in college. I actually had to go in for a final. Like I was having a meeting with one of my teachers and it was our final and I took too long to take a leave. I started getting cramps and I didn't act on it right away. And I was literally just on my bed feeling like the most shit I've ever felt and not even knowing what to do. Like I felt so bad that I didn't even know how to cope. I didn't know how to lay. It was just so uncomfortable. And I was just praying and waiting for the medicine to kick in. So what I learned from those experiences, both of which were because I waited too long to take a leave or something for cramps, is that as soon as I get any feeling of my period coming or any sign, get on that motherfucking leave. If you do have bad cramps, I think starting to like kind of keep track of my periods and know a little bit better when they were gonna come helped a lot with not being caught off guard like that, because that fucking sucks. So if you're not tracking your period yet, honestly, I really recommend it. It's just gonna make your life a whole lot easier. And then you don't have to worry about like not being prepared when it hits, or not being able to get a tampon fast enough, get medicine fast enough. Like just tracking your period, even if it's just kind of knowing what day of the month it usually comes, super fucking helpful. Gonna save your life. Growing up, I was definitely a pads girl because I was intimidated by tampons, and I was honestly just super uncomfortable with my body is how I'm gonna say it. Like the thought of putting something, we're really getting into like the TMI part of these girl talk videos. I have no shame. The thought of putting something in me was really scary for some reason, and just really intimidating because it was something I was so unfamiliar with and that was so foreign to me. So for a long time I stuck with pads, even though it was kind of more uncomfortable and more inconvenient. Like I had to worry about, you know, the lines of them. They were never really comfortable for me, and I would always dread having to use them. But I stuck with them because that's kind of what I was comfortable with, and I was nervous to like have to learn my body basically. I wish I had kind of done it sooner and just taken the plunge, and it really is a trial and error thing. Like the chances of you hurting yourself or doing something horribly wrong are not that high. I think there's a lot of fear and like just kind of nerves surrounding periods. You know, we hear about toxic shock syndrome and like don't leave your tampon in too long or you'll get sick, infections, all this crazy shit that we hear that kind of scares us around periods, and also just like kind of how taboo it is to talk about in some circles and with certain people. There's all this like fear, and like I think that's a big reason why I was nervous to try tampons is fear, and also the fact that like when I first got my period, like I was never really introduced to them. All of that being said, I was definitely kind of late to the game on tampons, but like that was a game changer for me. That made me like hate my period so much less and made me feel like I could actually function, and just made me feel a lot more comfortable like when I was on my periods, and was like a great step in terms of me getting acquainted with my body. There was actually quite a correlation between like me becoming more sexually active and like starting to use tampons, and just all of it came together at a similar time of me just like learning more about my body and getting more comfortable with myself. I would definitely say if you're like newer to getting your period, or maybe you are still just like using pads because that's what feels safe, if that's what you want to do, by all means like go for it. But I think tampons don't have to be as scary as they seem, and they can actually be a really good chance for you to like start understanding your own body more. For the longest time I was too scared to wear one overnight because I heard these like, I don't want to say myths, but basically, you know, heard through the grapevine, hey, it's dangerous to wear tampons overnight, wear pads, whatever. And I forget when it was, it may have been sometime in high school or college, where I actually like looked it up and basically found out that as long as you know, take the tampon out as soon as you wake up, it's fine. And I literally feel like I had been fucking duped, because I was like, this whole time I've been too scared to do this. I've been super uncomfortably wearing pads during the night because I felt like I had to. And like, for what? I do feel like there's some misinformation and just a lot of fear surrounding periods for no reason, and there doesn't need to be. One more, I guess, kind of advice thing or thing that I have found really helpful back when I was having periods is period underwear. If you are not aware, they do make underwear that is absorbent. So on either your lighter days or even on your heavier days, if you don't want to wear a tampon or pad, you can wear this underwear. It'll just soak up your blood and then you wash it, or just using it kind of as like a second layer of protection so that I wouldn't bleed through clothes and stuff. I really liked that. I think the brand that I was using was thinx, so I will have that link down below if you are curious. But I really liked that, and that was super nice and just like added an extra layer of reassurance, because I used to bleed through clothes like kind of frequently, and there were situations where I was wearing white pants and then I got my period, or where I thought my period was over and then I unexpectedly bled through some clothes. So yeah, strongly recommend that. I did try one of the like reusable period cups. I just could never really get it to work for me. I tried it twice, a couple years apart, because I love the concept and I love that it's sustainable, reusable. It's a great concept, but I would just always struggle a lot to put it in and out, and they need to like re-engineer those things with a string, because the way tampons are designed is so easy to use. Like once you get the hang of it, they're easy to use. I know they're kind of intimidating and seem complicated at first, but once you know where it goes, it's is snappy. But I could never get a handle on the fucking period cups, and it would just cause me way too much stress. I would be like sweating, I would be nervous like every time I had to take it in or out, and I was like, this is too much. Kind of a failed attempt at the whole period cup thing. But yeah, I mean, those are my period experiences. Like I said, I don't really have a period anymore, so I feel kind of out of touch with that. But if you do have any topics that you want me to talk about in the next episode of this little series, let me know, leave them down below. This is kind of a once a month thing on my channel, so it's gonna be a little while. If you have any experiences or thoughts on some of the things that I talked about in this video, definitely leave them in the comments. I would love to hear about your experiences with these things. Also, I don't know if I ever acknowledged this robe, but I'm wearing a Juicy Couture robe, which is just like fucking iconic. I mean, it's really unfortunate that it's literally 80 degrees in Los Angeles right now, and I can't have the AC on because it makes too much noise when I film, so I'm literally like kind of suffocating. But I wanted to do it for the cozy vibes and because I think this robe is super fucking cute. I love you guys so much. I will see you next week, and thank you for watching. Bye.
Yeah, his baby said that they don't got a future like it burns. So give him something worse to kill his head with, make him forget somehow. Might be that another day she would have wished he stayed, but they're done.